Welcome to the Physician Pharmacist Podcast, a show designed to shed some light on a very unusual pathway into medicine. I'm your host, Nathan Gartland, and I'm a licensed pharmacist and third-year medical student. I'm also the author of PharmD to MD and the owner of the Physician Pharmacist Company. As you know, this podcast primarily focuses on medical school admissions and the journey of getting in. But today we're taking another brief hiatus to talk a little bit about pharmacy fellowships. I believe there are a lot of parallels between getting into medical school and obviously applying to pharmacy fellowships. And I think that we're going to explore some of these details with our special guest, Dr. Noah Palmieri. Dr. Palmieri is a licensed pharmacist and 2018 graduate from Duquesne University School of Pharmacy. He continued his journey by enrolling in a postdoctoral fellowship at BD from 2018 to 2020, after which he entered the workforce as a medical science liaison specializing in oncology medications. He's currently working as a senior MSL at a publicly traded pharmaceutical company and acts as a conduit for external healthcare practitioners and internal medical affairs. His current specialty focuses on metabolic genetics to provide treatment plans for individuals with rare genetic diseases. Welcome to the show, Dr. Palmieri.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
Fantastic. Well, there's a lot of information to unpack right there. So, let's take things way back like I always do. And I ask about, how did you start in pharmacy and how did you get to this particular, I guess, start in that profession?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you what, I wouldn't necessarily have predicted that I'd be sitting, in the chair that I am now when I first decided to go to pharmacy school. So I think right off the bat, nobody I think really knows their path. It kind of just unfolds as they go. But taking it back, in high school, I knew that I wanted to do, some type of scientific degree in the healthcare field. But I was really having a hard time deciding. I was looking at medical school a little bit, but obviously, the comparison between medical school and pharmacy school, it's a 6-year program with less post, graduate requirements, and pharmacy was kind of more appealing to me. So I actually had a cousin going to Duquesne a couple of years ahead of me, and he was, telling me a lot about all the good things of pharmacy. So I ended up kind of going for the 6-year program at Duquesne. And I'm, really happy that I did. I met some great people along the way and got a great education, and enabled me to be getting into the professional world now. So it's been a great journey.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think a lot of people, starting out will consider in contrast, medical school versus pharmacy school. And pharmacy school, like you mentioned, is a little bit shorter, a little more condensed, and you can get involved, obviously, with your postgraduate, career ambitions a lot sooner versus medical school is obviously a lot longer of a track. So I guess, did you ever consider medical school any further from that point, or was it something that you sided with pharmacy and you just never looked back?
No, definitely. Right at the beginning, I was between kind of the two, and then I went with pharmacy school. And then actually, funnily enough, during pharmacy school, me and one of my good friends from my same pharmacy year, Sam Stitzel, we both were kind of, thinking to ourselves, like, should we do medical school, man? I don't know. And we actually, sat down and looked at it a little bit, and then both of us ended up staying in the pharmacy world. But I think pharmacy is obviously a great career, and it's been really good to me. But medicine is obviously fantastic as well, and I think there's a lot of attributes to being on that part of the healthcare team as well. But for me, pharmacy just ended up making the most sense at the 2 times that I looked at medical school, as a comparator, basically before I started, and then kind of halfway through pharmacy school.
So I guess you went to pharmacy school. What was your journey like throughout pharmacy school? I guess, were you ever considering pharmacy residencies, community pharmacy? How did you fall into the fellowship track?
Yeah, I had a really kind of interesting path through pharmacy school. And I guess you could say I was considering really all 3 areas at some point in time. When I first started pharmacy school, my worldview on what a pharmacist could be and could do was a lot smaller and a lot more traditional. So, like day one, sitting in Gen Bio and Gen Chem, I was expecting to do retail pharmacy in my local community, and be a pharmacist in that way. Then kind of as my studies went further, I became attached to the idea of potentially being a clinical pharmacist. So that was really my plan until I found out about fellowships, and from there, kind of later in pharmacy school, I started to focus on fellowships more towards in my fourth year and beyond.
That's awesome. And so I guess, introducing the concept of fellowships, this is something that's relatively novel to me, and I think isn't as common compared to, residency and community pharmacy for our listeners. So how does the fellowship application cycle even work? When does it start?
Yeah, the fellowship application cycle is it's a little bit different than something that you would do for like a residency. So the kind of the cycle would start when someone is in their last year of pharmacy school. The applications window usually would open up in the fall. The program that I participated in, the MCPHS postdoctoral fellowship program, usually in around late September or early October is when that window would open up. And from there, students would essentially submit an application to be considered for interviews. And before COVID hit and kind of changed the way the world worked, everything was always traditionally done at mid-year, and I believe that's still the case. Although I'm a couple of years removed from being a fellow, so I would assume that everything still happens at mid-year, but maybe some programs do it virtually now. But in any case, it's a little bit different from residencies with the portal and uploading all of your stuff and then waiting for that one fateful day in March, opens up their email and posts about where they're going to go and stuff like that. So a little bit different, a little more abstract. And then as far as like getting offers for employment, those kind of are at the discretion of each specific fellowship position as to when they want to extend those at or around the mid-year meeting. So you could be getting job offers in December, potentially January, or as late as even February, but usually towards the mid part of your sixth year is when kind of all the action happens for fellowships in terms of doing your interviews, doing your on-site interviews, and then getting an offer for employment and taking that.
Wow, that's a lot of information to unpack there. And I think it's interesting that it starts a lot sooner than pharmacy residencies. And I obviously didn't do one of these, but the recommendation that I'm aware of is that you kind of, start researching programs a little bit ahead of time, but, mid-year is basically where you are, really shopping around to see which programs are going to be good fits for you. Versus, like you said, with the fellowship, you're already like halfway applied and all situated, and you could be getting job offers right around that same time period. So I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's kind of like the compare and contrast is mid-year, you're looking at programs. If you're going to do residency, that's kind of where you meet and greet. Whereas mid-year for fellowship candidates is almost like D-Day in the sense that you're going to probably be doing 30 interviews over the course of that week with maybe 10 different programs. And it's going to be, a highly stressful process of, early mornings and late nights and basically trying to, rack your brain and talk about yourself probably 6 to 8 hours a day. So it's definitely a different mid-year week for the fellows versus those who are looking at residencies.
It's funny. I remember sneaking into some of the fellowship dinners when I attended mid-year, and the difference in my demeanor was dramatic compared to some of the fellowship individuals who were sitting there, and they just looked very tired. But
Yeah, yeah, you see a wide range of people, from people who are super tired to people who are super amped up and doing a death grip on their beverage of choice, and you can see them kind of being very rigid and stuff like that. And then there's people who are like you said, really exhausted as well. So you do see a lot of different emotions on display for that week in December.
yeah, mid-year is definitely a stressful time for the pharmacy profession, but also a
Yeah,
lot of
all
fun.
around. Yeah, definitely. But not too much fun. You always you never want to put yourself in a position. So I'll say that as a word of guidance. Anybody going to mid year, just make sure that assume that you could run into someone that you've just interviewed with at all times. So not to be the fun police per se, but keep it professional.
Absolutely. And so for individuals who are considering, pharmacy fellowships, do you have any recommendations to make them, I guess prepare them for to have a competitive run at the application cycle?
Definitely, definitely, I'd say that the best thing that people can do is to check and see if their particular school of pharmacy offers an appy rotation at a pharmaceutical company. I was lucky enough to take advantage of Duquesne's rotation at Eli Lilly and Company in Indianapolis. So I was able to spend 5 weeks there. And importantly, too, you want to make sure that you do an appy at a pharma, or regulatory body or whatever it may be, but do it before mid-year, because unfortunately, if you have it scheduled in like March or April, that's great for your personal growth and exposure, but you can't talk about that in a job interview in December. So make sure to front load your 6th year with any appies that are, relevant to the pharmaceutical fellowship world. Outside of that, you can also maybe look at summer internships, and basically the goal, if you're interested in a fellowship, should be getting exposure to what it's like to work in a pharmaceutical company, kind of the structure of the organization that, or not organization, but really industry that you're looking to join. So if you're wanting to be an MSL fellow, you should kind of have a general idea of how medical affairs works, regulatory, and if you're looking to do marketing, you should have a general idea of the commercial side of things. But really, it's a long-winded answer, but you basically just want to have some exposure and some knowledge of the pharmaceutical industry going into your interviews, if possible.
Yeah, so it sounds like obviously, getting to meet people and doing those appy rotations at those facilities to gain perspective is going to be, crucial. I'm curious to know how does like, GPA grades and, other like maybe research exposure help with like an applicant?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely, I would say, GPA considerations and things like that. But I would say as well, and research is great if it's there. But I would say overall, I mean, everybody's a body of their, whole exposure in pharmacy school, and nobody is really reduced to a number just by their GPA. So I think personality is really important as well. So obviously you have to have a professional candor. You have to have the GPA should be good, and obviously the higher, the more competitive, and things like that. But certainly, personality plays a role in that. And when a candidate's being considered, I think the prospective interviewer is going to consider their GPA and their research, but also, is this somebody that I want to have sitting a couple desks away from me for the next 2 years potentially? So it's kind of a little bit of everything.
Absolutely. And there's certainly a lot of parallels with that and getting into medical school too, because as a adcom who's, interviewing applicants for medical school, they want to make sure that this individual is going to be a good fit that is going to contribute to, the class and the curriculum and so on. So same kind of principle with obviously, joining a fellowship.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely, no doubt. It's pretty much every factor will be considered. So it's important to, you know, have a decent GPA, have good credentials to your name in terms of the what you can offer from your report card basically. But then also, it's important to be a respectful person. It's important to have humility and be ready to join a team and work really hard with them.
Absolutely. And so when applying to fellowships, how many programs do you generally recommend students apply to? Do you have to cast a wide net, or is it more narrow focused in the sense that you only apply to programs that you did appy rotations at?
Yeah, that's a great question. Certainly, I would say you would apply to more than just your appy rotations. But kind of, it's like you want to do a little bit of a Goldilocks move where you apply to enough that gives you the exposure and the chances to, move on to a second and third round interview if you're successful. But you don't want to apply to so many that then your week at mid year is full of 5-6 interviews a day, or I don't even know how many people can handle these days. But you essentially don't want to overload yourself, because if you overload, then the quality of your interviewing skills will go down. So I think, thinking back on my experience, I maybe applied to 6 to 8 programs. And then obviously each one of those is going to have a first round interview, and then potentially, if you're going further, a second and a third round. So, you can basically, if you are expecting to be successful at something you apply to, you're looking at maybe 2 to 3 interviews at that particular company. So keep that in perspective. If you apply to 10 different, if you apply to 10 different programs, you could potentially be doing, 20, 25 different interviews over the course of a week. So, definitely don't overload it is my guidance, but certainly don't just apply. In my case, I didn't just apply to Eli Lilly, I applied to several. And the last thing I'll add too, you generally should, have a narrative of what kind of position you are, approaching in terms of, the commercial realm or the medical realm. And in my experience, I think what I would guide people to do is mainly just stick in applying in one area or the other. So if you, because generally, I believe if you're doing the Rutgers program, and I'm getting a bit off the rails here, but they can, I think, see what other programs you've applied to. So if you're in one interview saying, "Oh, it's my passion to be a medical science liaison. I really want to, focus on the science. That's my thing. I could do it for 30 years." Then in the next interview, if you're like, "Oh, actually, marketing is my thing. I really can't wait to come up with strategic business plans because I'm a big marketing person," you're kind of getting a little bit inauthentic, switching between what your quote unquote passion is. So stick, like I did pretty much all medical interviews when I was in the process.
Wow, that's actually super interesting to think about that. And so, just the sheer volume of interviews that an individual could set themselves up for, sometimes even mistakenly, where they like you said, they apply to 10 programs, they get all secondary, possible tertiary interviews. 25 interviews in a week sounds horrible. I don't even know how you would keep it all straight.
Yeah, it's definitely a delicate dance of, you want to have shots on goal, but you definitely don't want to reduce the overall quality of your ability to speak to yourself. So it can snowball really quick.
Awesome, awesome. So, I guess my follow-up question is there a match day for individuals? You've gone through all these interviews. Do they rank you, or how does that work exactly in comparison to maybe residency?
Yeah, that's a great question. Certainly, each preceptor and each program director is going to be, looking at the candidates that they have. But generally, in the fellowship world, it all culminates with an on-site interview. So, if maybe 100 people apply to a position, maybe 3 or 4 will get brought, to an on-site at the physical company's, headquarters, or again, post COVID, it could potentially be remote now, I guess. But if you have an on-site interview, you should be pretty sure that you're one of the 3 or 4 final people. And then from there, it just comes down to any typical job where they look at all the candidates and pick the one that they think is the best fit. And as far as a specific day, this actually does not occur on any specific day. So certainly there are people who get offers extended at the mid-year meeting itself. There's obviously the majority will be in the weeks directly after mid-year as well. So everybody goes to mid-year, and everybody usually, that's kind of the general base of where all the interviews will occur. But from there, it's really up to the program as to when they want to extend offers and things of that nature. And I'll add on as well, when I speak about mid-year, I'm kind of referring to the like Rutgers, MCPHS, Northeastern fellowship programs. But over the last few years, so many more fellowship programs are popping up, and I'm sure that there are probably some who do things maybe outside of mid-year. So definitely, any candidate who's interested in a fellowship, just make sure you do your due diligence and ensure that while most usually occur at mid-year, maybe there's potentially some new fellowship programs that do interviews separately. So I just want to make sure that I'm not putting up anything that's not fully correct, I guess.
Yeah, all great points right there. So I definitely appreciate that. So, after you've been, I guess, granted a fellowship position at that point, obviously you're very excited. What do you recommend to individuals who have gotten to that point? Is there any recommendations that they should be doing prior to starting that fellowship? Perhaps maybe like boards or licensure or just straight up relaxation?
Yeah, that's another great question. I would say, you're almost transitioning from being a student to now, being a person in the real world, quote unquote. So, I would say that each particular person who accepts a job offer to start a fellowship, obviously check with your preceptor or program director as to any prerequisites or recommended readings or things like that. But certainly, I think it's important to keep in mind, if you're at the point where you've just gotten a fellowship, you've completed from anywhere from 6 to 8 years of university education to get there, and it's important to I think have a fresh mindset and get ready for the next challenge. So be good to yourself, enjoy the last half of the year of your pharmacy school studies, and get ready to hit the ground running. But certainly lean on the program that you are selected for to tell you really what to do as it comes to getting ready for that particular job. And just to follow up on your question as well as it relates to licensure and things like that, you can definitely use the time from around May of graduation to generally sometime midsummer when you'd be starting at the fellowship. You can, start your studies and prepare to get licensed. You don't definitely do not have to be a licensed pharmacist to do a fellowship. But especially with me being in the medical world, I think it's nice to have the registered pharmacist behind the PharmD just to show people that I did get my state licensure. So I did end up getting licensed in my first year during my fellowship, and you can obviously work with your preceptor and program director to carve off a day off for maybe studying, or take a day to take your boards and things like that.
Yeah, that's super interesting to hear that. And it's going to be the easiest to get your boards taken care of right after you graduate, in the sense that everything's going to be so fresh. You still have some momentum, So if you take a couple years off and then you fall away from that, I feel like it might be even harder to jump back on.
Yeah, 100%. I would certainly recommend people to stay up on their studies after they graduate. And if you're feeling really driven, potentially you could even take your examination prior to your fellowship start date. But like you said, Nate, that's a great point. That really, the longer you wait, the more all this knowledge that A, studied for a long time to learn, and B, paid a lot of money for, it's going to start to fade off as you focus more on your day-to-day duties as a fellow. So you want to make sure that obviously, get licensed if you can, and just have a backup. I was actually able to give COVID shots during obviously the crisis in 2021. I was able to utilize my active licensure to give shots on the weekend, and my company was fine with that. And I was able to give back to the community a little bit, and chip into the student loans a little extra for those few months. So it's all about having options, and you may as well get licensed if you spend all those years.
Yeah, the pandemic provided a lot of opportunities for pharmacists who, especially like us, who needed some. I guess we're busy doing other things with our our careers, and it allowed us to kind of jump into some very flexible positions. Because I was also doing COVID shots during that time period with a couple different companies who just needed basically pharmacy support. Because they were just drowning in all of the labor that was associated with it. So that's cool that you were able to do that as well on the side.
Yeah, it worked out really nice.
So tell me a little bit about your fellowship experience. What was that like for you?
Yeah, the fellowship, it was a fantastic experience. A lot of personal and professional growth occurred over my time, with MCPHS and at BD. I was exposed to both the commercial side. My fellowship was clinical marketing. So it's actually the one commercial fellowship that I applied for. Everything else was medical, but technically the one commercial one that I applied for, I ended up getting, which is kind of funny. So again, take all my advice with a grain of salt, because earlier I said to only do one or the other, and it's okay if you do maybe one, of the commercial side, but don't do like 5 and 5. I would generally keep it focused. So my fellowship experience was great, though. I was able to learn a lot about what it's like to be on the commercial side, come up with marketing plans, see what sales reps face on a day-to-day basis. Of there was one day where we rented a car and drove around Los Angeles for like 6 hours, and it was a lot of time spent on the highway, and then going and having a meeting and potentially getting turned away, or they didn't want to speak with us. So big respect gained for sales reps when I was in the commercial side of things. And I was also able to do a little bit of a medical rotation with the MSLs at Becton Dickinson, and that was really enlightening for me and really influential, and helped me get my full-time position now as an MSL. That experience was great. So overall fellowships, they're just such a fantastic learning experience, because certainly you have your day-to-day requirements and your day-to-day things that you're working on, but at the end of the day, the companies are really investing in you. They're employing you through this program to basically learn as much as you can in your 1 to 2 years there, and be a potential asset for them in the future if you end up staying on with them, or wherever you go in the future. So fellowships are all about just learning and exposure. It's really the only job you can ever have where just the goal is to learn as much as possible, and better yourself.
Absolutely. And it follows that principle of, you get what you put into it. And the more,
100%.
yeah, the more you invest into, learning things and being hands-on, the more opportunities and doors you're going to open down the line. So it sounds like, that was something that kind of happened to you. And obviously with that MSL experience that you had with that rotation.
Yeah,
And
no doubt.
I'm curious to know, was there anything you found more challenging than you originally anticipated?
Um, honestly, I would say the biggest challenge for me of the fellowship, which I didn't anticipate so much when I signed up, and accepted it, but I think just geographically, moving from Pittsburgh to northern New Jersey, I didn't have any family there, and kind of within the MCPHS program, the Becton Dickinson Fellowship is, the headquarters of the business is in northern New Jersey, but the rest of the programs within the MCPHS, or Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences program, are located in and around the Boston area. So as far as having the fellows, from other companies nearby me, that I didn't necessarily have that. It was mainly just me and my group at BD, which, a lot of them are so many of my close friends for life, I would say. So I would just say, making that transition from leaving home, if you will, to kind of going out in the world. And actually, the first the first year of the fellowship, I couldn't really afford to find any places that I could reasonably pay for, so I had to find some roommates and just get to know people that I'd never met in my life. So it's a lot, but it makes you a better person. And as you said, the more experiences you go through, you become more well-rounded, and that you can take it for what it's worth and grow from it.
Yeah, that's one of the recommendations we make for, getting into medical school is, when you're down to the line picking a program, you want to have access to a good support network. Are you going to be comfortable in that particular region? And sometimes, you don't have any choice and you're kind of stuck with that. But it's definitely a consideration to have. So, I'm glad that you found solace in, some of the other individuals you were working with, but it can definitely be challenging. So I definitely recognize that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's good
So
advice to give.
So I guess what was your work-life balance like? I'm under the impression that you traveled quite a bit because you mentioned the LA.
Yeah, certainly. And different fellowships will have different kind of so I'll talk about my experience, but definitely anybody listening, that's not going to be the experience for every single fellow, just because the opportunities and different positions that you can get are so varying. Um, I did travel quite a bit domestically in the United States, supporting the clinical marketing objectives, as well as getting the chance to work with the MSLs at Becton Dickinson. So it was a lot of travel. I think there was one month where I was gone like 24 days out of the month, which was fine, obviously, because I didn't have like a pet goldfish I needed to take care of, or a dog or anything like that. So you can potentially travel a lot if you're a fellow, and that kind of reflects different positions where there's travel more and less. There's some positions that will travel not nearly as much, and then there's others where the travel is, they're on a global team, so they're getting to go to Europe for conferences left and right, and things like that. So it's a salaried position. You're working, you're getting paid 40 hours a week, and potentially there's some weeks where it's a little lighter than 40 if it's a slow time of the year, but there's potentially some weeks where you're connecting from LA to Newark through Chicago, and then a blizzard hits and your flight gets canceled and you get stuck, and things like that. So you definitely, if you are looking to work in the pharmaceutical industry, and you want to travel, being very flexible, and being ready to deal with the unexpected. Always expect the unexpected when you're dealing with travel. I'll say that.
Absolutely. You have to be adaptable for sure.
Yeah.
So, after you had finished a couple years in fellowship, where did you end up going next?
Yeah, so I was really lucky to get an amazing opportunity to join a great company in my first role out of participating in the fellowship program. So I was in oncology MSL, working for actually a privately held company, and it was a fantastic experience. It was a very small company that I joined, and the people there were just A1, and I can't say enough about how good everyone was to work with there, and I still keep in touch with many of them. But It was definitely a big step. I still remember that going into the first, physician meeting when, I was actually the MSL now instead of just the fellow. So it was a little bit, daunting at first, but I think, everybody kind of feels that imposter syndrome, but it's important to remember that we only get to where we are through so many years of hard work, and you're there for a reason if you're stepping into that room and getting ready to run that meeting. So self-doubt can always creep in, but I think it's important to remind yourself of all the hard work that you've done. And that was really what got me through my first 3 to 6 months as an MSL, just getting more comfortable. And from there, it came easier and easier as I got more confident in myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone experiences a little bit of imposter syndrome, especially as you breach that threshold where you graduated. And, even as a pharmacist, I myself, I'm in medical school, but at the same time, I was working as a pharmacist. And it feels so strange to put that white coat on and sit there and make, people turn to you and ask you to make these clinical decisions. And it can be overwhelming at first, but like you said, over time, you just get adjusted to it. You've trained for that particular purpose, and it all kind of falls into place if you've done the work ahead of time.
No, 100%. And certainly that feeling. I mean, when I was giving COVID shots, I also had the chance to cover a few days in a physical, like, brick and mortar pharmacy when someone got sick or something like that. And I still remember the feeling of, like, I'm ready to verify my first prescription and heart's pounding a little bit, and it's like metformin 500 milligrams. Like, I think we got this. But so yeah, I'm glad. I was happy that metformin was the first one, because you know everyone takes that. So it was, that was good. But you know it it's very daunting when the rubber hits the road and the spotlight is kind of on you, and people are, like you said, looking to you. That's where you have to be confident in yourself, and it certainly doesn't come naturally for some. And for me, it didn't come naturally out of the gate. But just the more exposure that you have, you can gain confidence in yourself that should rightfully be there. Like you said, we work really hard to get to where we want to be.
Absolutely. So, can you tell me a little bit about, what an MSL does? What's your day to day?
Yeah, an MSL is a medical science liaison, and the day to day is pretty variable, and that reflects the job. So, really, the goal of an MSL, to put it, as simply as possible, is to be the point person when it comes to science for a company. So, an MSL's job is to bridge kind of the internal science that's happening at an organization with outside stakeholders, or HCPs, basically, you know, depending on the disease state. Obviously MDs and things of the like would be there, but nurse practitioners as well, physician assistants, basically people taking care of those who are affected by whatever disease the company is working on. So the MSL does a lot with kind of bridging that gap and making sure that any scientific questions that need a detailed explanation can be answered appropriately. The MSL also works to support any research proposals generally that are brought in externally to the company. The MSL will kind of shepherd external research proposals through an internal review board to see if they'll be approved or not. And as well, MSLs will cover conferences where they serve, generally at a medical booth, to be kind of a face for medical affairs at a particular company, and answer questions for those who maybe come up to the booth and want to know something. And as well, MSLs go and cover scientific sessions, and then are able to interact with those podium speakers delivering presentations, as well as prepare a report that they can then provide internally to basically let the rest of medical affairs know, hey, this is conference ABCDEFG was in Houston, Texas over this last couple weeks, or one, not couple weeks, but a couple days. And these are the main things that were brought up. So MSLs have a very variable job in terms of the roles and responsibilities.
For sure. And there's definitely a lot to unpack there. But, essentially what I kind of took away is, you serve as the medical professional who has like the doctorate, the education, the training, who can then kind of translate some of that medical jargon, interpret results from particular studies or, interests, when it comes to external parties, and then translate that into potentially like a business model, or make sure that individuals who are working in that field, maybe like an MBA or someone with that kind of degree, can understand and then kind of move the ball down the field. Is that correct?
Yeah, certainly. So really, the main thing as an MSL is that there should be a separation from the pure science that an MSL deals with, and the business side of the company. But certainly, if there's a particular question about coverage for a medication, if it's marketed or something like that, MSLs always can refer HCPs to other members of the organization on the commercial side, who can offer more support from that side of things. But overall, you know, as I said earlier, the MSL's chief role is to be the science person. But again, companies at the end of the day are businesses, and they need to make money, and they follow business plans for the commercial side, and medical plans on the medical side. So MSLs are working, in a strategic role, obviously, but they're doing so compliantly, and making sure that everything is kosher from the standpoint of the rules that the FDA sets out for interaction types, and everything. There's a lot of rules, but I hope that I was able to answer your question.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, now that you've kind of moved up to the senior MSL level, how have your responsibilities changed, from, I guess, where you started?
Yeah, definitely. The senior MSL role is been great for me to kind of grow into more responsibility, as you said. I think really at its core, it's just more what the company entrusts you with, and not that they obviously don't trust you if you're an entry level MSL or an associate MSL, but now that I'm a senior MSL, you know I kind of have a little more autonomy over my region as to making recommendations on specific regional and smaller conferences that I believe that the company would benefit from having a presence at, as well as just having a little bit more autonomy as to kind of I guess autonomy and confidence in making recommendations with my professional judgment to my boss and their superiors as well. So the role is relatively the same in terms of the day to day. But again, it's like if you're at a company where you have associate MSLs and then you have a senior MSL, that senior title just reflects the little bit more experience that you've garnered, and kind of the increase in confidence and judgment that you can offer given your experience to get there.
Absolutely. I guess to kind of like summarize that, you verified that you know what you're doing. They can take maybe the training wheels off and let you, pull the trigger on a lot more, executive level decisions when it comes to that level and degree.
Yeah, definitely. It certainly just reflects that you've been in MSL for a couple of years now, and you're ready to take the step up. And whether that means that you plan more conferences as a senior MSL, or you have a little bit more on your plate, it's just kind of like the workload is commensurate with the title, and you move up a little bit in the world, and so comes the responsibilities with your increased title is all.
And I'm also curious to know, so you were originally working in like oncology drugs, but then you've kind of shifted more to genetics. I'm curious to hear how training for that, or was it like a dramatic shift in, your knowledge base that you had to learn and develop, or was it relatively similar in the sense that you understood the framework at that point and you just kind of filled in, the different topics?
Yeah, so definitely, and this actually takes me back to some great advice from, my mentor Tom, that he provided me with, which is, if you're ever looking to change a role in the pharmaceutical industry, you can change two things. You can change your therapeutic area, and you can change your job type. And he gave me some great advice, which was basically pick one. So you can, if you're an MSL in oncology, you could get a job offer and be an MSL in rare disease now, because you only need to learn the rare disease part. The MSL part you already know, which would conversely, say you're an MSL in oncology, and then you have a complete change of heart and you want to be like a marketing manager in pulmonology. So now you have to, obviously, assuming you apply for it and get the job, now you have to learn two different things at once: your in your job role and your science that you're doing. So that's really great advice from him. Basically, just only pick one of the two. So kind of having the foundation and the skill set of an MSL, I was able to get an offer to go to the rare disease side of things, and particularly in the metabolic world of rare disease where I work now. And the training always for MSLs is handled by the company. So you definitely get a nice, probably 3 month usual boot camp of basically that, they'll give you a training plan, and whether there's an assessment with that or not, that's up to them. But, rest assured, any MSL who's out in the field has had rigorous training from their company to make sure that they're, well versed in all the science that they cover. But it was, a lot of learning, but it was fun. Honestly, I'm always someone who loves to learn, and it was really cool to learn all the new science at the place where I'm at now.
Fantastic. Well, I love to hear all of that. And
Hmm.
I'm curious, how, I guess, where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years? What are your goals?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Definitely I want to continue growing professionally. I've always kind of wondered what it would be like potentially to, manage an MSL team. So I think, if one day, if the opportunity presents itself, I think that would certainly be something that would pique my interest. Outside of that, I've always kind of had a passion in aviation, and I told myself I want to get a private pilot's license one day. So I think in the next 5 to 10 years, if I, have time to do that on the side, and obviously as a hobby, not necessarily a career change, but it'd be fun to learn how to do that. So, I think it's good to have both personal and professional goals. So focus on work, but also it's good to have something that you're passionate about, and build forward to that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Of course, you want to, have professional goals, like you said, but you don't also want to marry your career. There's more to life than all of that. So that's good to hear.
Totally. Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually kind of it kind of reminds me back into my interviews, and just a little tidbit of advice I'll give. So, obviously you bring yourself up there and you want to talk about your technical knowledge and things like that, and for your fellowship interviews. And experiences are important too, but also I think it's good to talk a little bit about, hobbies, potentially, obviously at the end, maybe just one question, just to have a little bit of your personal side come out. But the funny story that I'm reminded of is I did a lot of sailing with a good family friend during college. So I talked about that at the end of the interview. They said, "What do you like to do?" And I said, "Well, I sailed a little bit and I enjoy it." And it turns out that the person interviewing me also knew about sailing. So they immediately started using technical sailing terms, and said, "Okay, if the wind was coming at 90-degree angle and you were looking to head in this direction, how would you trim the sail and set your?" So, which I knew because it was a real genuine thing. But again, the reminder is like, bring your hobbies and personal life up, but don't try to make anything up, because you never know when someone's gonna ask you technical information about something that you claim to know about. So just a little funny story.
But yeah, I mean, that's such a great point right there, because despite, you're talking about something that you're passionate about, and for that interviewer, that's probably one of the most memorable interviews they've had. I'm sure
That's
you
true.
shined like a, spotlight there.
Yeah.
Um, just because you talk about something, obviously you're qualified for the position, you made it to the interview point. So now they want to see that you're someone with, outside personality, with, ambitions beyond just getting into a particular program. So that's great.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, that the best advice that I can offer is, certainly, obviously, you want to have a well-rounded CV that reflects, really good effort in school and getting involved with extracurriculars and everything. But at the end of the day, I think, authenticity is really important. And I can obviously say for myself, if I was ever looking to hire somebody, that authenticity is really important to me, and I'm sure potentially others in the field as well. So obviously maintain, great GPA and your extracurriculars. But at the end of the day, there's a person interviewing you, and they're interviewing a person. And I think it's important to, just be real with people during job interviews, and, just be your real self. And I think, things work out from there.
And speaking on hobbies, I know you're obviously a busy individual, so I'm not sure how much time you have to read, but are there any like potential books that you would recommend to students, or do you have like a personal favorite that you just like to share?
Certainly from the fellowship world. I'm blanking on the title of it, but there was a book that was really helpful for me. And I'll get you that title, and you can read it off or post it in the description. Um, but I would say a really good book I read actually recently. It's called Sled Driver, and it's a guy who flew SR-71 spy planes, and he actually has a crazy story. He got shot down in Vietnam and was like burning in his wreck, and somehow got like 15 different surgeries to be able to fly this crazy Mach 3 spy plane. And really enthralling book. And you can actually the PDF is available online, I think, if you search it. So yeah, Sled Driver is a really cool read that I would recommend, especially if you like aviation, which, again, if you can't tell, when I'm not talking science, I like planes, which is kind of nerdy, but I embrace it.
No, not a problem. You got to stick with what you're passionate about, like you said.
No doubt.
Alrighty, so we've come to the end of our interview today, and I'd like to thank all of our listeners for the support. If you have any additional questions about the medical school journey or fellowships, you can check out my website at www.physicianpharmacist.com. Before we let you go, Dr. Palmieri, how can our listeners learn more about you or get in touch?
Yeah, great question. Certainly, I'm available on LinkedIn. So if you just search my name, I should come up pretty quickly. And feel free to message me, reach out, and as long as I have the bandwidth, I'd be happy to help whoever and however many people I can.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Noah. I know you're a very busy individual, and I really do appreciate your time.
No, likewise, and thanks for having me, and good luck with the rest of all that you do. Certainly, getting to know you at Duquesne, and seeing you bridge from pharmacy to now medical school. The sky is definitely the limit, and who knows? One day you might be the chief medical officer at a drug company, and I'll be working for you. So I wouldn't surprise me.
Oh my goodness. We'll see. We'll see. But all right, I appreciate it and take care.
Hey, likewise. You have a good start to 2023.
All right.